En estos meses se desataron
In
todas
these
las
few
tormentas
months,
juntas.
all the storms were unleashed
Pero
at
no
the
por
same
eso
time.
vamos a perder las
But that's
esperanzas.
no reason to lose hope. We
Debemos
must
madurar
mature
como
as a
sociedad
society and not
y
continue
no
living
seguir
above our
viviendo por
means,
arriba de nuestras
nor continue
posibilidades,
living with corruption.
ni convivir más con la corrupción.
From the Turkish lira to the Argentine peso, currencies in emerging markets are in crisis. In the last year, the peso has lost roughly half its value. The central bank has raised interest rates to 60%, the highest anywhere in the world. But the tumbling currency has forced President Mauricio Macri to take further action. His government announced a raft of spending cuts, hoping to stabilize the fragile economy. He's even asked the International Monetary Fund for an early release of a loan package. But this has only raised some investors' fears. Many in the country blame the IMF for the country's economic crash in 2001. So could an IMF bailout breathe new life into the economy or hamstring it even more? To discuss this, we're joined by Arturo Porzecanski. He's the director of the International Economics Program at the American University in Washington. And in Paris, we're joined by TRT World's editor-at-large, Craig Copetas. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. Arturo, let me begin with you. In a nutshell, how did Argentina get here?
Well, the problem was the poisoned inheritance that the current administration received after 12 years of populism, courtesy of Mr. and Mrs. Kirchner. And their decision was not to deal with it, at least not some of the more painful aspects of it. And so they made some initial reforms, like they freed up the foreign exchange market and removed the capital controls and import controls, but they did not deal with the heavy legacy of very high government spending, very high taxes, and very many distortions throughout the economy. These things came back to haunt them now.
And Arturo, for some, getting another IMF loan is like going back to a poisonous ex who messed up your whole life. Is that what's going to happen to Argentina?
Well, first of all, I think that debate is pretty much over now because it happened in May. They concluded the agreement in June. And now the problem is that the program is off the rails. It has to be redone. And also Argentina is asking for more money to be delivered up front than has already been done. So the IMF is part of the story now, and let's hope that they make the best of it.
Okay, so Craig, are we only talking about Argentina when it comes to Argentina's currency crisis and the economic wobbles? Or can we not talk about Argentina without talking about Turkey, for example, or even South Africa and beyond? Is there an emerging markets crisis? Help me understand this.
Yes, there is an emerging market crisis. There is a contagion going on, but and there is linkage between all of these countries. But let's start with Argentina. The history of Argentina from its founding has been a litany of corruption, and corruption that has led to economic failure. What is the specific problem right now affecting Argentina, Turkey, and all these other emerging markets? The problem is they need to win back investors. They need to win back their confidence. So what we're seeing right now is a fierce battle against the collapse of investor confidence in these countries. And the Orthodox mechanisms of the past, the IMF, no longer work. The radical solutions offered by Turkey and other countries also no longer work. Why? Because the more they try to win back investor confidence, the more they lose it, the more their currency is devalued, and the higher the interest rates have to be pushed up. In Argentina's case, you're looking at 60%. 60% is the rate the mob gives you.
What about tightening of the belts? Austerity, Craig, does that work?
Tightening the belt? Well, that is what the IMF wants. It's called conditionality and structural reform. Those are the bureaucratic terms the IMF uses. In the old days, you sent a gunboat upriver when you wanted to get your money back from a country that had welched on you. Now the IMF comes in and they say you have to do this, this, and this for us to give you the bailout money, which, by the way, you're going to be paying vigorish on. Look at Greece. You're going to be paying, in Greece's case, they're paying off the vigorish and the principal for the next 60 years. Argentina and Turkey share three things in common. They both have a large current account deficit. They have ghoulishly dollar-denominated debt, and they have double-digit inflation. What Argentina is saying, well, we're going to cut our government ministries by 50%, raise export taxes, raise interest rates, and we're going to secure this $50 billion credit line. That's orthodoxy, IMF orthodoxy as formulated at Bretton Woods in 1944. What Turkey is saying is no, inflation cannot be controlled by higher rates and in fact should be lowered. Now, the Turkish central bank might well raise interest rates, but even the hint of that still hasn't ended the slumping lira. And in Argentina's case, going the Orthodox route, it hasn't helped the peso.
Okay, so that's an interesting point.
This is why we're looking at a
good
contagion.
point. So Arturo, you have Turkey trying one approach as a solution and Argentina another, and both the currencies still doing badly. What does that tell us?
That the solutions were the wrong ones. And the Orthodox medicine of tightening budgets and tightening the monetary policy was tried too little, too late. So obviously, it's not a good time for the emerging markets, but there are some whose currencies have gone down 5, 10, 15%. And there are others, like Turkey and Argentina, where it's gone down 40, 50, 60%. And the difference is what the authorities had done before the wave hit and also what they're doing currently. I think that in both cases, the confidence of investors has been lost, and it will have to be hard won. And I think the IMF will try to do its best to be helpful here. This is the Argentines' plan. They've made it very clear. It's not something imposed by the IMF. I would say the IMF has been very soft on Argentina so far. They probably will get harder now, but they need the hard medicine.
Have they been soft on them, Craig?
Look it. This is not a question of ideology, which a lot of people try to frame it as. The fact is that the criteria and statistics the IMF uses to define success to their members and their bankers are the same criteria and statistics that spell doom to the very people that help is designed to save. And I want to go back to Greece here for a moment. The conventional wisdom right now is, oh, Greece is all right. They're back on the road to recovery. Don't say that in Greece, because they're looking at 60 years of paying off interest and principal. And that is what Turkey would get sucked into if it took out an IMF loan, which it's not apparently not going to do. And, you know, it's a question of, you know, they're making a desert and calling it peace, as Tacitus said. You know, yeah, but are the Argentine people willing to take a medicine that's going to kill them?
Right.
That is a legitimate question.
Right. And Arturo, if we look at Greece as a possible example, the economy contracts, right? When we look at austerity measures, we saw restlessness on the streets for successive Greek governments. Even when Syriza came in, they found an angry population because they had to play the game and become pragmatic. Are we going to see Macri face restlessness on the streets of Argentina as the Argentines tighten their belts and take their medicine from the IMF?
I imagine so. The recession has already started, and the labor unions are restless because they're losing ground to inflation. But this is the situation. The good options have already lapsed. Hopefully, it will not be a multi-year process like in the case of Greece. I think Greece's problems were much more serious, and also the constraint under which Greece has operated, namely within the Eurozone, are much greater. Argentina now is not like in 2001, where they were confined by their one-to-one relationship with the dollar. Now they have exchange rate, monetary, fiscal, and other freedoms that a member of the Eurozone does not have. So I think they will have, hopefully, some kind of V-type contraction of economic activity and also of inflation. And a year from now, we will look on them as, well, having gone through a painful experience, but at least something good came out of it.
Craig, do you agree that the good options have already lapsed?
I think Argentina is going to suffer. I think that what we're seeing in emerging markets has to do with the velocity of currency, the velocity of the US dollar. The fact that the dollar is the global currency, as was agreed upon at Bretton Woods in 1944. There is no way getting away from that. In fact, discussing alternatives to the US dollar as a global currency is really the stuff of an edgy comedy routine right now. But you put the comedy aside and the tragedy aside, we don't know what's going to happen, but what's clear here is the cascade effect is such that at some point in the future, there is definitely going to have to be another modern day sort of Bretton Woods meeting to discuss this problem, because it is a problem and it's going to get worse.
Craig, is the dollar being nefariously, deliberately weaponized against countries such as Turkey? That's a view here on the streets. People would concede. They'll say, listen, yes, we probably have bad policies, but it's also the Trump administration using the power of the dollar against us. Is there truth to that?
Again, let's take the ideology off the table. It is absolutely true that Donald Trump has fully weaponized the US dollar and is attempting to extraterritorially enforce US law in order to promote his foreign policy directives. He has militarized the economy. He has militarized the international status of the dollar. And let's take Turkey off the table. There are many other countries who have said this. The French have said it. The Germans have said it. The British are saying it privately. Many corporations are saying it outside of the United States. It's reached a point right now where you have executives from major European and Asian corporations being told by their legal departments not to travel to the United States because they may be brought in for questioning, perhaps, as in the case of Halkbank, even jailed, or in the case of BNP Paribas, jailing and fines of billions and billions of dollars, because the United States weaponized the dollar and said, you're breaking U.S. sanctions. Donald Trump has done absolutely nothing to de-escalate this crisis. Everything from his trade wars with NAFTA and everything else, this is a major problem.
Right. Arturo, very finally, is it going to be worthwhile for us to have another program where we discuss the weaponization of the dollar under Trump and whether there should be alternatives to the dollar?
Yes, I think that should have been left for another program. I thought we were going to talk about Argentina. And certainly,
but that's why I'm asking you for another program. Yeah.
Yeah, Argentina is certainly not a victim here of any such weaponization. They brought this upon themselves. And now they've got to get themselves out of it with help from the IMF. If they don't want the help from the IMF, they don't have to have it. But they tried swimming against the current without the fund, and it didn't work. Now they're going to try it with the fund. I hope it works for their own sake and all of the rest of us.
Okay, gentlemen, I've got to wrap, but it's been really good picking your brains. Arturo Porzecanski and Craig Copetas, thanks for joining us.